The Tampa Bay Lightning hosted their first official team practice on Thursday as they get ready for the start of the 2024-2025 season. That means we're getting a whole lot more things rolling here on Locked On Lightning. As today, we break down that Lightning first practice, talk about some defense for Tampa, and tell you who the breakout star of this season might just be. All that and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Lightning. Josh Sperber here, wanting to thank all of you for tuning in and making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. Locked On Lightning is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Josh Sperber here, the host of Locked On Lightning. Make sure that you like and subscribe no matter what service you're watching on. We're on YouTube if you're looking at my face, and if not, you're on Spotify, Apple, anywhere else you get your podcasts. But definitely appreciate the subscriptions along with, of course, the views. Now, as I mentioned, practice has gotten underway for the Tampa Bay Lightning. There were some pressers after practice with J.J. Moser, one of the newest members of the Tampa Bay Lightning defense, and a long-term member of the Tampa Bay Lightning defense, Nick Cernak, who is going to have his line partner back in Ryan McDonagh. Defense was a big focal point of the first Lightning practice, and that we will get into a little bit more in the next segment. But it wasn't just all about Victor Hedman. It was obviously Hedman's first practice since being named the Lightning captain on Wednesday. So his leadership skills were really put to the test. But anyone who came up to the podium on Media Day on Wednesday, and both the Lightning players who spoke after practice, among others, talked about the strong leadership of Victor Hedman. So it seems like he is adjusting seamlessly into his new role as the Lightning captain. And that, it just is continuing to reinforce the unanimous vote of Victor Hedman as the 11th captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning. That I don't think we'll get any disagreements from anybody else. Ryan McDonagh was kind of a surprise move in the offseason. His former line mate, Eric Cernak, who is likely to be back with him on second line defense during this Lightning season, did speak after practice and talk about how he was just absolutely over the moon, really happy to have his line mate, his cup-winning line mate, back on the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Ryan McDonagh, another member of the Lightning assistant captain, starting to get more insight on his leadership ability and the amount of respect that he still commands in that Lightning locker room. There are a good bit of players in the Lightning roster who played with Ryan McDonagh, but there's still enough that don't really remember him, or there were still prospects coming up in the Lightning system when Mac was back with the Tampa Bay Lightning in his first stint. But he was signed in the offseason, and certainly he talked about how he didn't expect to be traded, but was obviously very happy to be back with the Tampa Bay Lightning, felt honored to be named an assistant captain, and was, of course, excited to be working with Victor Hedman once again. But it seems likely that Eric Cernak will be McDonagh's line mate in defensive line too. And J.J. Moser was talking after practice, going on the other side. Victor Hedman's spot on defense is usually where Moser has been defensively in his entire NHL career. In practice, Moser was paired with Hedman for the majority of the day. Obviously, Hedman's not going to change his spot, so Moser had to, switching his stick, and he was talking in practice about just getting used to the new side of the ice that he's going to be playing defense for the Lightning. So J.J. Moser, as we've talked about a lot this week, one of the two key pieces acquired in the Mikhail Sergachev trade, and he seems likely to take Sergachev's spot on that first line defense. One thing that was not discussed all that much were the prospects. And the Lightning do have a couple of really strong offensive prospects. Of course, Connor Geekie is a name that crosses the mind of just about everyone, and he is up on that training camp roster, still starting to get some shifts in, and he could be worked his way up those lines as well. But really, it was just about the band kind of getting back together for the Tampa Bay Lightning when they were discussing practice. And Steven Stamkos was still a big topic. Victor Hedman's captaincy was a big topic, and everyone who spoke just talked about him with such great respect as well. And that is really giving me a whole lot of more confidence about this Tampa Bay Lightning team this season. Everyone really seems kind of bought in to the team mentality, to just the team focus about getting back to being a perennial playoff team. Excuse me, and getting back to being that same Tampa Bay Lightning that won back-to-back Stanley Cups. And I think the defense is going to be a really huge part of that. We've kind of talked about who the leaders of the defense have sort of emerged to be. Two of the three captains and alternate captains are on defense. And the offense really has not changed all that much for the Tampa Bay Lightning. It seems most of the predictions that I'm seeing when it comes to the line for Tampa have things pretty similar to the way they were last year. The third line, Nick Paul, Connor Sheary, Mitchell Chaffee is named by a couple people. The centers, though, is going to be a really big point of contention. I think Braden Point has that first line center locked up, but Luke Glendening's injury kind of complicates things. And of course, it's also going to be about where the prospects are going to fit. That's something I think that is going to be developed a little bit more later on in the week as the practices ramp up and as the Lightning players get more comfortable with some of their new teammates and Coach John Cooper has a chance to talk about or has a chance to see really who gels really well with who. And that will be kind of give better insight to how the Lightning will line up their team this year. One important thing for the Lightning, particularly their defense, is Andrei Vasilevskiy. He spoke before practice, and Vasilevskiy said that he did feel slightly healthier than he did at this point last season. Kind of joked about his injury a little bit, but he seems like he's on track to start the season. Doesn't seem like that is going to be delay, which really I think was a big part in the Lightning stumble at the beginning of last season was the fact that they didn't have Andrei Vasilevskiy. Braden Point said that Vasilevskiy, when he's in there, is the best goalie in the NHL. He's just thrilled to have him in the back of his net while Point is up front on the attack. But Braden Point was very complimentary of Andrei Vasilevskiy, who is obviously very excited for Victor Hedman. Started off seeming kind of ambivalent when he was on the podium talking about the new captain and kind of moving on from Steven Stamkos, but he seemed to echo the sentiments of the rest of the team that Hedman is going to be the perfect choice. And it really doesn't seem like in terms of the leadership, there is as much of a change with Victor Hedman there because he has been there for so long and because he has been such a constant presence and leader on this Tampa Bay Lightning team over the past decade plus. Another thing that came up during the post-practice press conferences, again, was moving on from Steven Stamkos, and something that was repeated a lot, not just by Coach John Cooper, but by some of the other players who talked about it. No one is talking about replacing Steven Stamkos. Everyone is talking about just kind of moving on and getting used to life without him. That's why a little later on in this show, I'm going to talk about an offensive player who is going, I hope, to have a big breakout season and really bolster that Tampa Bay Lightning attack, which is now without maybe the greatest scorer and player in franchise history. We can keep talking about Steven Stamkos all you want, but first we're going to take a little bit break and then discuss some of the leaders emerging on defense. We kind of brought up Ryan McDonagh and Victor Hedman, but having those veterans there, we're going to expand on that right after a word from our good friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk quite a lot about FanDuel, And that's because FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. We have something a little bit different for you. FanDuel is running a promotion now until September the 22nd, where all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And I know football is one of, if not the most bet on sport on the planet. With a YouTube TV base plan, you can watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel every time. You can visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sports book. Make sure to do that before hockey season so FanDuel can update some odds for you as you get ready to place your bets on NHL hockey. But my tip, put a lot of money on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Josh Sperber back here on Locked On Lightning as we get ready to kind of go over parts of what we have talked about, the defense. Something that John Cooper really mentioned after practice today and was seemingly echoed by a lot of the players, particularly Andrei Vasilevskiy, Victor Hedman, and Ryan McDonagh. Those obviously maybe the three most crucial defenders to the Tampa Bay Lightning's blue liners in this upcoming season. But John Cooper made some points about defense in his press conference after practice, talking about how last season the problem with the Lightning was not on offense. It was not about getting goals in the net. Lightning were able to do that and keep pace offensively with just about any team in the NHL on any given night. Obviously, Nikita Kucherov played a big role in that with his 100 assists last year and his team second best 44 goals for the Tampa Bay Lightning, leading the NHL in points on the season. So offense is something that Tampa is hoping to just keep pace with after the departure of Steven Stamkos, with a lot of the same couple of guys back and some of the new players hoping to fit in on offense. Obviously, we've talked about Jake Gensel around this week. We're going to expand more on him. Some of the new guys trying to work their way up. Cam Atkinson expected and projected to be on the second line, maybe a power play guy as well. And Jake Gensel, another guy who's supposed to excel on the power plays. Emgus Girgensons, another guy who's supposed to come in on the power play as well. But for the most part, if you look at the Lightning's offensive players, it's prospects who have been with the organization for a little while. And it's guys like Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov who have come up with the team, and, other players like that for Tampa as well. But it's defense where, even though there is still plenty of consistency on that defensive side, that is still the point that John Cooper found to be the weakest in the Tampa Bay Lightning. And like I've been saying, Andrei Vasilevskiy plays a big role in that. He was the only Lightning goalkeeper with a win percentage that was above 600 in last season, and not having him healthy was a big problem. Him being back in the net is going to make enough of a difference, but it's the leadership that is really kind of focused on the Lightning defense, which I think could make a huge impact this year. We talked, of course, about Victor Hedman as the captain, but Ryan McDonagh is a crucial player on defense who I think needs to step up in his return to the Tampa Bay Lightning, because the defense especially is pretty young. From that Stanley Cup team, you don't have a whole lot of returners. Obviously, Victor Hedman, the biggest name coming back. Eric Cernak will be back on the same line with Ryan McDonagh. He returns, and then beyond that, it's just guys who haven't had as much hockey. It's guys who have been backups more for Tampa Bay in their time in the NHL. And even with Victor Hedman as the captain, Ryan McDonagh is still an alternate captain on this team, and that carries some weight, especially when it comes to leadership. And the Lightning kind of broke their rule by naming McDonagh captain. I say that sarcastically because there's obviously no rule that says you need to have spent your whole career with Tampa to be a captain or an alternate captain for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But the last couple of years, that's been how it was. Guys who have just spent their whole career with Tampa And to me, at least, when there were people like Braden Point who could have been an alternate captain, or Andrei Vasilevsky, regardless of all the red tape surrounding goalies as captains and alternates in the league, there were still players who had been with the Lightning for the entirety of their career, and in some cases even longer than the time Ryan McDonagh spent with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But in a season where rebuilding is going to be one of the focus, that's inevitable after you lose a star franchise player, get a new captain, all of that stuff. That extra leadership on defense is going to be crucial, because the defense of the Tampa Bay Lightning was one of their biggest weaknesses last year. This year, it needs to be one of their strengths. Their leadership is located mostly on their defense. There are a couple of young guys like J.J. Moser who they're going to be working into the mix. Emil Lilleberg is likely to be on the third defensive line this season for the Lightning. He is someone who doesn't have a whole lot of pro experience either. So having two alternate captains on defense is going to be a massive help for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You combine that, you combine two of the three lines with long-time, 30-plus-year-old, decade-long NHL veterans of Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonagh on separate lines. That is, I think, fantastic. I've always believed in sports like soccer and hockey with captains that the best captains are on defense, because those are the people that really, if the defensive-minded players, particularly in hockey, can really shape the game. I mean, Victor Hedman, we've all seen him change so many games with his attacking play, but he's still a solid and very physical defender as well. The Lightning have a couple of defenders that can bring the puck up the ice as well and help on the attack, but it's the leadership on defense that hopefully will help the Tampa Bay Lightning as they get ready for this season. And of course, Andrei Vasilevsky seems healthy, so it is very likely that he will be in the net for game number 1 on October 11th. And the more games that Vasilevsky can play, I think the better. I mean, with a goalie like that and not as much depth behind Andrei Vasilevsky, it makes it harder for a team. Like, it's just harder to be without a guy like that. He is such a necessary presence in the net. So having Vasilevsky healthier will certainly help. And of course, the leadership council really focused on defense, with Nikita Kucherov being the only offensive alternate captain. So it seems like it's going to be Victor Hedman, maybe J.J. Moser on that first line. That'll be an interesting pair to see. I'm sure we'll talk more about that if more news comes on that. But J.J. Moser is certainly a guy that I'm going to be keeping my eye on during training camp and all the preseason, because he is a second new acquisition for the Lightning that could be a first-line guy. Jake Gensel seems inevitable as the first-line left winger for the Lightning, with Braden Point locked in at center, Nikita Kucherov locked in at right wing. Jake Gensel seems to be the obvious choice to replace Stamkos on the left. That's the first-line offense. Vasilevsky, obviously the main goalie. On defense, J.J. Moser could be the newcomer beside Victor Hedman, it seems, on that first line of defense as well. So two newcomers in the starters for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that is where the leadership can help. Having Kucherov on the line with another newcomer is huge. And then having Victor Hedman, the captain, with a new member of the Lightning could also be huge, just because, you know, a guy that J.J. Moser is going to want to emulate as much as he can is someone like Victor Hedman, who's been there and done just about everything that you can do in his NHL career. And putting Moser on that line will not only help him acclimate quicker to defense, but I think it's going to help his progression and his advancement in the NHL, because he is going to be constantly learning from Victor Hedman. And that is just, I mean, that's probably what most budding NHL defensemen are going to want as they get their career, just getting to learn from a veteran like that in Victor Hedman. So that defense is going to be a crucial unit for the Tampa Bay Lightning as they try to, I guess, bounce back in some ways. For the way the Lightning have had their success, they are always a team that's going to want to win the division, but the defense is going to take the Lightning as far as they can go this year. The offense is going to keep Lightning in just about every game, but it's the defense that is going to make the difference. And I think that's one of the reasons Ryan McDonagh was named a captain, and while they'll split him and Victor Hedman up on a couple lines. Now, we've talked a whole lot about the defense so far on Locked On Lightning, but after this next break, we'll transition to some offense, because there is one offensive player on the Lightning who I think is in need of a big-time breakout season, and I'll talk to you about it right after these messages. Welcome back into Locked On Lightning. Still Josh Sperber, and we are in the third and final segment of our Friday show here on Locked On Lightning, your team every day. Now, we've talked a lot about defense, but I still don't want to undercut the importance of this Tampa Bay Lightning offense. It is going to be the Lightning's strength this season. That is something that's really been their MO the last couple of years, just a high-powered offense really leading their attack. Hopefully the defense stays healthy and can just keep shored up behind them to keep the Lightning in a lot more games. But on offense, without Steven Stamkos, we talked about it earlier in the show, no one's trying to replace Stammer. You can't replace Stammer. That is just out of the question. He's just been so good for so long that he is not someone that can be completely replaced when on a new team. But there are players that have been with the Lightning for a good bit that are, I think, in need of a huge season, regardless of their past success with the team, for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And for me, that guy is going to be Brayden Point. There's enough pressure. There's plenty of pressure on Jake Gensel right now. There's always pressure on Nikita Kucherov, as good as he is. And Brayden Point has kind of been an unsung hero on that first line. He played all but one game over the last two seasons for Tampa, finishing just 3 goals shy of 100 since 2022 with 88 assists. He had 44 assists in each of the past two seasons, finishing with 2 of his career 90-point seasons for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And since his first 90-point season, 41 goals, 51 assists in 79 games in 2018-2019, really the first breakout season of Brayden Point, he had a couple of years that were down from the level that he had really achieved. After getting 32 goals and 34 assists in season 1, he was 25 and 39 in 2019 and 2020, the shortened seasons, and then 23 and 25, a career low 48 points, except his first season as a pro. But the last 2 years, Brayden Point has really stepped up a notch. In 2018, he was an all-star for the first time as an NHL player. And I'm not saying the Lightning are going to need an all-star season from him. It certainly would help. And if the Lightning can get an all-star season from Brayden Point, particularly if Jake Gensel is as good as advertised, because it really seems like the coaching staff and the players have a lot of confidence in him. A couple of the guys, Brayden Point included, talked about Jake Gensel as just already a really good locker room influence and a fantastic player for Carolina or wherever they had seen him in his past career. It seems like he's going to be able to make the transition to a guy who's going to have to be one of the offensive leaders and maybe the top goal scoring option for the Tampa Bay Lightning this season if they want to be successful. But added success of a big year from Brayden Point would be massive. Some of the center depth is already stunted at the beginning of the season. Michael Eyssimont is not expected back for a couple of weeks into the season. And then if you look at the centers, you have Anthony Cirelli, who should take the second line at center. Gage Gonzalez is untested. Luke Glendening is one of the older players on the Lightning, but with that aside, there's still doubt if he's going to be able to play in week 1. Who knows where Zemgus Girgensons is going to go? He is listed as a center, but he can't play on the wings as well. And then you might have to make room for guys like Gabriel Sturck, who had a great season. Lucas Svejkovsky, who was acquired from the Penguins in the offseason, he's listed as a center. And though he might start in one of the minor league affiliates for the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're going to have to work him in at some point in the season. If Conger Geeky's as good as advertised, that's going to add some depth as well. But there's just a lot of untested depth behind the line one center of the Tampa Bay Lightning in Brayden Point. So we've talked a whole lot about leadership over the course of today's episode. That leadership talk has mainly been focused on the defense, but if we turn the page to offense here, Brayden Point is really in line for just a big season. He is coming off of one of his best seasons as an NHL player. He did have a -20, a -16 in terms of plus or minus. The only time he finished, or one of two times he finished with a negative plus minus so far in his pro career. But he had his second highest goal output in a season and tied his second highest assist output in a season in 2023 and 2024. The last two seasons really solidified Brayden Point as a key player in Tampa Bay Lightning's team. And now he's not it's far past the whole prospect thing. He's been around the block in this league. He's won Stanley Cups with the Lightning. He's been key contributors on really solid playoff teams. But it's time for Brayden Point to really take his game to the next level, because it's going to be a challenge for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the playoffs. It's something you'll hear on Locked On NHL later on in this preseason. But, the Lightning are going to have a big challenge getting back to the playoffs. Their division improved, and there's already some really solid teams in that division. And it's going to be difficult for the Tampa Bay Lightning to make the playoffs. So they're going to have to get some big performances from some other players. And I'm not saying last season from Brayden Point was inadequate. 46 goals, 44 assists to 90 points. That's pretty darn good. That is pretty elite. But I think the Lightning may just be asking a bit more of Brayden Point, not because he's underperforming, but just because there are so many young centers, young attackers, young wingers, forwards, everything. There's a lot of young offensive depth in this Lightning organization. When we talked about the prospects earlier this week, you notice that most of those top prospects that I was talking about were offensive players. The Lightning are really at a key moment in developing their offensive guys, because they're kind of using everyone. They really could go deep down the list of their top prospects this season, depending on how it goes, because quite frankly, with a team that is pretty well consisted of guys with playing experience for the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's still a half new roster. Something that John Cooper was talking about a lot after practice was just getting everybody adjusted, just getting himself used to seeing some of these new guys, getting himself acclimated, and, seeing what to watch out for or whatever in the games of some of these guys that he just doesn't even know all that well. So having a guy like Brayden Point, 28 years old, in his prime, has had a long, successful career in the league so far at just 28. This is going to be his 9th NHL season, and he typically averages about a period on the ice. So he's a guy who's on the ice a whole lot, and the Lightning are going to want to take advantage of his very strong offensive ability. And I think that I think the Lightning can make the playoffs. I think it is certainly not a lock that they're a wild card team. There is going to be a lot of competition in their division this season. But if we're going to assume that a healthy Andrei Vasilevsky brings back Vazzy to his status of being one of, if not the best goalie in the entire NHL, if we're going to assume that Nikita Kucherov is going to continue playing like one of, if not the best offensive goal chances, goal scoring producers in the NHL. Adding Braden Point into that mix can only make the Lightning that much better and give them that much better a chance of getting back to the playoffs and getting maybe, hopefully, back to the Stanley Cup game. Of course, it's way too early to start seeing where the season is going to go, but a couple of big keys that we talked about today, just in summation before I sign off, is the leadership on the defense being a driving force, and Braden Point is, in my opinion, who needs to have the biggest breakout season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. The link to our social media is below. You can debate that with us if you DM me on social media. Maybe you'll even be featured in the show. You can visit our account on the link below at Locked On Lightning on X, or you can DM me at my personal account at Josh_Sperber on X. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Lightning and making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. Now, if you're looking for a second listen, make sure to go find Locked On NHL, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That'll be it for this week. I'm Josh Sperber. Preseason gets started next week. So when we come back on Monday, we'll have a whole lot of other things to talk about. But until then, please make sure to like, follow, and subscribe, depending on whatever medium that you listen on. And stay tuned for the beginning of really the first full week of the season. That starts next week if you're counting preseason as the season. That debate could be for another time. Until then, though, I'm Josh Sperber here on Locked On Lightning. Thank you all for tuning in and enjoy your weekend.